Good evening.
Evening.
If you unmute your mic first. Hey, good evening, everybody.
Yes, my mic is My mic isn't muted, is it?
No, you're fine. You're fine. Just glad to see everybody could make it on the Sabbath evening. Um, we're here with Dave and John and Dr. Ricks, and we're going to discuss end time prophecy Bible study principles tonight. And so, if you would take us out, Dr. Ricks.
Let's start off with a little fun so we can enjoy in a positive way this Sabbath evening. This one's called Retail Experience. Rossi was the manager of an upscale men's store, and Abe comes in and he applies for the job, and he tells him the nice high salary he wants. He says, but you don't have any retail sales experience. Why should you get such a nice high salary? You have no retail experience. And Abe says, well, he says, you have to understand that the work is so much harder when you don't know what you're doing. Now, this next one is true friendship among golfing buddies. A guy brings his best golfing mate home unannounced for dinner at 6:30 one evening, and they sit at the kitchen table. His wife screams her head off while his friend sits down with his mouth wide open, and she really gives her husband a piece of her mind. She says, my hair and my makeup are not done. The house is an absolute mess. The dishes in the sink are a mess. And you can't you see that I'm still in my PJs? I can't be bothered with cooking tonight. And why? Tell me, why did you bring your friend home unannounced, you stupid idiot? So the husband calmly says, the reason I brought him home is because he's thinking of getting married.
That's a good one.
I hope I'm safe the rest of the evening. One final one. This actually, American general said this many years ago, but lately Putin said it. He said, to forgive terrorists is up to God, but my job is send them to him.
Yeah, I heard that one.
Okay, well, maybe that one is funny. Okay, well, we're going to look at, I think the number one principle in end time prophecy, number one, we're going to go through 6, is prophecies have a moral message. Or another way of putting it, the only reason God is giving us the prophecy is to help us spiritually. It's not, just so we can know secrets nobody else knows. And that's really the number one purpose, and people have to realize the prophecy is there to warn us so that we can be more repentant, we can avoid doing bad things, so we can grow spiritually and morally. And if we don't get that point, we're missing the whole point of prophecy. About 25% of the Bible is prophecy, and like some things are just historical, but put together, the Bible is meant to help us grow spiritually. And you could take the book of Revelation, probably the most all concentrated prophecy book and the biggest in the Bible. It starts off with a warning to the 7 churches, kind of a model for all churches, because if you have ears, let you hear. And the book of Revelation is a warning to the people of evil Babylon the Great. And I want to go first, just speaking of prophecy, because in Matthew 24, Christ has asked the question, when will your coming be? So Matthew 24 is a prophetic book. And I want to just cover this section in Matthew 24. We'll pick it up in verse 45 and 46, Matthew 24. Verse 45, And this is Christ talking to his disciples. Who then is faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food and all the proper time? It will be good for that servant who master finds him so doing when he returns. And then he goes on to say, the point of that story is to stay ever vigilant, like the Boy Scouts, ever ready. That's the whole point of Matthew 24, is for us to stay spiritually ready all the time. We could even go up to verse 44. We're going to mention this later, but I just want to mention it again. Saying it more than once is, they say redundancy is good for our education. So you also must be ready, verse 44, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect or you think not. So we have to be ready. And spiritually, that's what staying vigilant, that's what Bible prophecies are for. To keep us spiritually vigilant.
And I think that the words you use spiritually are important. It's not, I deal with people who are going, I'm ready for whatever comes. I've got my guns and I've got my food and I've got, we should have ability to feed ourselves and take care of ourselves or whatever. But I think spiritually, if you're prepared spiritually, you got a relationship with Christ, you don't have to worry like the rest of the world would.
That's so true.
And that's done through study, prayer, fasting, consistent attendance at church, because iron sharpens iron. And Paul told us to not forsake the gathering together, as some have. I know tomorrow when we go to church, we're going to have a Bible study, and that, for me, that's a very growing time, because I'm going to have people throwing questions and throwing their opinions, and we're going to be a family, and we're going to help each other. They're going to tell me something that I haven't thought of, or they're going to reaffirm something that I know, and hopefully I do the same. And so I think regular attendance is very important. And what helps you to fit in with that is your study and your prayer time. I call that being a spiritual prepper, preparing yourself.
It's a good term. I like that.
Yeah, spiritually preparing yourself for whatever could happen. But if your relationship is with Christ, I had a guy years ago, I took a sales class, and he says, how do you stay motivated? And he goes, so we are all going, well, I stay motivated because he goes, think of the money. Think of the end result. It's a sales class. Well, God is offering us the key to the kingdom. Think of the reward you have of being with Christ and your loved ones, people who are or your family members that you never met because they died 200 years ago, that maybe Christ was working with and you had no idea. There's no way you could have known that you'll get to be with these people for eternity. So you have to keep your eye on the kingdom, and that will help you to stay prepared as well.
Let me give you a story about that. Last Sabbath at 4:18 in the afternoon, one of the members of the Rockland Church, Jeanette Armour, passed away. She died in the hospital. Massive heart attack.
Sorry to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Jeanette began attending church when the Fresno Church was raised up in the 50s.
Ooh.
Been around a long, long time. I won't go through it all, but she was extremely faithful. And last Saturday afternoon, I went to see her before church, then I had to leave and come back. But she died while I was at church. But as I was leaving her hospital bed, she was barely lucid, able to talk to me. But she held my hand, and we prayed, and we were holding hands. And she said, John, I know I am dying. My time is now. She said, but I know that in my next waking moment, I will be in the kingdom of God at Jesus' return, and I will be with Jesus and the kingdom of God forever. And then she closed her eyes and went into that phase of final going out. And if you knew this lady, you would know that she was such an example. She was prepared. not just on a deathbed, but over about 60 years of studying and praying and being faithful to God. So she was prepared. She knew the prophecy. She knew everything there was. She was excellent, excellent Christian, and we are most happy to have had her. We will have a memorial service for her at church tomorrow. But I just wanted to point out, being spiritually prepared, she was prepared, and she'll be there.
When you have a relationship with Christ, I've found people that I have known don't seem to have the fear or anxiety when they know their time is coming.
Mm.
Because as you said, she said, the next thing I see is going to be everything perfect. I'm going to close my eyes and wake up with the keys to not the city, the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, but the key word she uses is "I know." Okay? Like Paul, I know. That means complete confidence.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you're skipping church and you're starting to slide back into the world, you don't know. Or you start to lose faith, and then you start to lose grasp on everything you've been taught and learned.
That's right.
And that goes back to Dave's point. I mean, getting to church, having someone, especially having someone like her that was in it so long that you can see is stuck with it as long as they have and keep coming, regardless of all the things that could, get them out of the church. They've made it. There's, you've heard of marathons. Well, there's something called an ultra marathon, where these people run 100 miles in the desert uphill. It's amazing if you look it up, what these people do. And if you think of the kingdom of our approach to God's kingdom and to our end of our life, that it's more like an ultra marathon for us. It's so long. It's such, you got to stay with it. Not 26 miles, but over 100 for your entire life. And you need those you need the church visits. You need those stations, those refreshment stations or whatever, to get you to it. And you need each other. You need people to support you, and you need to be support for everybody else. But listening to her, the story you told of her, just remind us that we need that, and that her example was a testament to that you stay with it, you stay in a church, and when it is your time to die and to rest, that you don't have any doubts and you don't have any fears. And I've noticed that about people in the church, especially people who've been in a long time. They have no fear, no doubt, and they are not worried. They just they hold on to that and know, hey, this may be over someday soon, but you know what? What's coming is so much better, and it's such a better truth to know the truth than to be thinking you're floating on clouds and playing harps. And it's such a better. The truth is so much better than what the world is teaching us. Anyway, sorry, but I kind of got off on that. But it's good to see you made it back. I see you dropped off.
Yes, whatever.
Are we going to Nineveh next?
Mysterious thing happened. I don't know. But it's just like you were saying, like Paul said. He had run his course, and he knew a crown was waiting for him. And if you pass away in Christ in that spirit, you've got it made. You're the lucky one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
One way to look at it. And speaking of prophecy, another thing in 1 Thessalonians 5, I'm going to read this in verse 3 through 6, 1 Thessalonians 5. Paul writes to Thessalonians, while people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. I take that to mean some aspects of either World War III and or things that God will do are going to hit suddenly. Just like World War II, certain things happen suddenly. We don't know what they'll be, but that means you've got to stay ready. And then Paul says, but you, brothers, are not going to be in darkness, so this day should surprise you like a thief, in the night. You are all sons of light, sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep. Most people in the world, when it comes to world affairs and or Bible prophecy, including a lot of church people, are asleep. But let us be alert and self-controlled. In other words, we will be in the light. We will see the end getting closer and closer and closer. And we should use that to motivate us. And I really believe most people in the world, they don't watch world affairs that much. They know very little about Bible prophecy, not accurately. Some think, well, we're going to get raptured away if things get bad. That's about all I need to think about. And they will be caught completely, at least 80-90% off guard, most of them.
You know, a lot of people look to prophecy as something neat or something cool to study, or they put it in the same classification as ghosts and who knows what else. But they look at it as a hobby, and that's not what it is. But a lot of people, it draws them in, and they chase after this person who has this, they think has this piece of prophecy, or they chase after this person because they say this about prophecy and it sounds good, so we'll go with that. Instead of reading what the Bible says, watching what's going on in the world, they want to chase someone in their little prophecy, twigs or whatever that they come up with. You see that a lot.
Something I've said, and you kind of said it too, Ken. It's easier to teach an atheist what the Bible believes, not convert them, but teach them what the Bible says, because they don't start off with a belief system. If you have somebody that believes in Santa Claus, you're going to have a hard time showing him that he's not in the Bible. If you have somebody who believes in a rapture or going to heaven or whatever, they read the Bible with that end result in mind, and they try to build their theology from something that doesn't build that theology. If you have somebody that has never grown up reading the Bible, has no idea, and you just say, read it to me, black and white words, they'll come up with the truth. Not that they believe it, but it'll say, well, that's what it says.
The problem is the whole world just about has been tainted in one way or another.
And speaking of taints, the second prophecy principle is the big one, and that is we'll be getting closer and closer to the end time. And those of us that are Christians will see us getting closer and closer to the end. But there'll be people with all kinds of clever little conspiracy theories and weird ideas that they will know the exact date when Christ comes back. Remember we read Matthew 24:44, where it says, think not, that you can know when Christ is going to come. Even when you read the whole context of Matthew 24, even Christ, at least at that time, did not know. Only the Father knew. So from that point of view, if the Bible says, think not that you can know the exact date, what that tells me is anytime somebody comes up with some elaborate scheme of numbers and half days and counts, and I've seen a bunch of them, it's going to be October 1st, 2017. I got it pinned down. And they make a big ballyhoo over it. Then it will not be that date, because God said it's going to happen when you think not. So if you think that's the date, and all it will do is embarrass Christianity.
Right. It's like preparing for a tornado. If you know when a storm's coming, but you can't tell if a tornado is going to come out of the storm, where it's going to hit and the path it's going to take. But you can know the times, the signs of a storm coming, the ozone in the air, or not that. I mean, that's afterwards. But I mean, you can, how it gets still and how the temperature changes and how things change, and you can know that a storm is coming, but you can't predict how it's going to hit exactly, where it's going to, how hard it's going to. You can't, and none of that. But you can know the signs that something's coming, and you should always be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
We were studying Proverbs chapter 22 this past Wednesday night at church Bible study. And 22 verse 3, it says, a prudent man foresees the evil and hides himself. It's talking about David earlier talking about spiritual preparation. We can see this overall set of prophecy. We don't set dates, but we see it coming. So we become spiritually mature and set and prepared, because it says simple people, like you said, people aren't paying that much attention to God. You can't even take him down the street in the book. And they just pass on, and when it comes suddenly, they're going to be taken and just absolutely demolished and destroyed by it. They won't know what to do. They'll be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and hearts failing them and wishing they could die when this all happens and comes down. But those who have prepared spiritually, seeing what's coming, not setting dates, but being ready, will be in much, much better shape in the sight of God.
And I like one principle when you're looking at events. World events can slow down, they can speed up, they can slow down. Just a few. When the Jewish people took the center of Jerusalem, everybody thought they're going to build a temple. They're going to build a temple. But actually, things slowed down after that. Kind of went back to some level of normalcy, if that's what you can call the Middle East. Or when the Soviet Union, in 1990, when the Berlin Wall was breached and the soldiers didn't fire on them, within a few weeks, the vast Soviet Empire collapsed. It was
7 weeks.
Yeah, it's a few weeks. And it was gone. It was like, what happened? And things just speeded up. And I'm saying, while I'm like everybody else, I think the world is in a fragile economy, and ISIS could cause more trouble, and all those refugees could cause more trouble. And where the Europe may cry out for a strong man, I mean, I can see that coming maybe next year or whenever. It could happen faster than we think.
Something I've thought is one, when you set a date and a time, you're trying to handcuff God. We're working on God's time. It's something we don't understand. We just have to be prepared spiritually and emotionally and hopefully physically taking care of ourselves and that kind of thing. 2, last Friday night, 9 o'clock, everyone in France was going to their dinners, going to the show, going to their friend's house, doing whatever people do. 10:45, they were under martial law. So God can act as quickly or as slowly as He wants.
Correct.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that.
I'm sorry?
No, I thought you stopped, but you were just freezing up. Go ahead. I just had a point to make when you're done.
He who endures into the end. I don't endure ice cream. I love ice cream. We have to endure this world and what our government or whatever is going around us until the end. And during us enduring that, we've got to be spiritually ready. And again, that study and stay close to people at church and pray.
And
what I was going to mention was, that it's just curious that happened. It happened on a Friday night, where if there was any Sabbath-keeping Christians there, they would have probably been home. They probably wouldn't have had any. You know what I'm saying? And because we always wonder where our place of safety is. Our place of safety is with God and keeping His laws and His commandments. That usually puts us in a place we need to be when the rest of the world is doing what the world does. It's just something you could observe by watching what happened last week. Now, not to say that everything always happens on a Friday night or Saturday, but it's just an interesting thing to think about. By keeping God's laws and His statutes, puts you in a position to avoid these things.
Right.
Interesting, most of the people who died were in a rock and roll concert on Friday night. Just an interesting aside to what you were saying. And one thing I think we need to do when we're analyzing prophecy, keep an open mind. There are going to be some factors that are going to, some events that will surprise us that we didn't expect. We don't want to see anything that we haven't already expected. That's a closed mind. Have an open mind to something that may surprise you. One thing I don't want to make is cry wolf, wolf. So generally cultist leaders, when something happens in the world, I know one about 5-6 years ago, he told them the end is coming in a year or two, send me a whole bunch of money and get ready to come to the compound, or words to that effect. Well, you can see scaring people like that is in the long run is going to wear down their faith, right? So, we know the end is getting closer, but we don't know how much closer yet. We can speculate. It's sort of like, go ahead.
my thing is when somebody says, I had a guy say, whatever's going to happen to bring it all in, it's got to happen before 2017. Um, and my thing is, you know, a lot can happen. Anything can happen. But show me that scripture, because I don't see 2017 in here. I guess I can find whatever 2017. But the date 2017, and I hear people say that, you know, well, Obama this and Obama that. I'm not happy with some of the things he's done. Maybe many of the things he's done, I don't know. But I don't see Obama's name in here. There is the name Barack, but I think a lot of times it's referring to Hebrew people. But I don't see his name. But Barack will be there, and then there's going to be the rapture, you know, or Obama will be there, and there's going to be. I don't see it. It's not that obvious. And the only way that you're going to have the protection is to develop that relationship with Christ. It's amazing. You'll see people. I talked to a friend of mine yesterday. I asked how his dog was doing, and he was very upset. He had to put the dog down. How much more so does Christ love us than that guy loved that German Shepherd?
And by the way, that's a real good point. God will take care of us. I was thinking about what Ken said about hurricanes. Here, this actually happened in New Orleans, what people tell me. They had a number of hurricane warnings because of where New Orleans is for a number of years. Hurricanes coming our way, and you know, a lot of people get out of town, but a lot of people in the inner city, they got used to hearing a hurricane's coming, and usually it went 100 miles west, 100 miles east. They got a bad rainstorm, a little bit of flooding, nothing too bad. And so all those newscasts were taken as crying wolf, wolf. But for something, I think it was 2005, Katrina, the center of it went right over New Orleans, busted their badly maintained levees. Well, you know the story. A lot of people have been used to the wolf, wolf. It's not going to be that bad. And so they got caught in that storm. And a lot of them died and lost possessions. And, well, anyway, a lot of bad things happen. We don't want to get caught in that thing where if you cry wolf, wolf too much, the brethren don't take it seriously. And then when it is time, they'll be caught short because they won't believe it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hopefully none of that will happen to any of us, and it embarrassed the church. The third principle, and we can, see how many of you, what you think of these, but is to watch key players and key events. And I'm just going to read a few of the key events, and we can discuss it. I put down the work of the church as a key event. And normally you don't think of the work of the church as a key event, but I think it is. I don't know exactly how to interpret it. That may be the tough part. But in Matthew 24, verse 14, Christ said, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Now, of course, there's a lot of questions you could ask about that. Like I remember GTA once saying, they surveyed people, this is like 15, 16 years ago, in different places and asked them, about certain parts of the gospel. Most people didn't know any of it. Even though the Worldwide Church did a great work, I'm not denying that, there's still a lot of people all over the world, including in America, who don't really know the true gospel yet.
When Worldwide started keeping Christmas, they asked my father to put together a questionnaire for people in services about should we meet on the Sabbath, should we keep the holy days at the correct times, or should we just do a Saturday to Saturday holy day season for trumpets. So my father, being the character that he is, he put in there, what do you think about keeping Christmas? Should we keep it when the rest of the world does, or should we keep it on the actual birthday? And several people said if we're going to keep it, it should be on the actual birthday. Several apparently. These are people that were sitting in church with me that apparently thought they knew the actual day.
So the main point I think is that the gospel has not gone to the world. I mean, maybe it went to the world, but a lot of the world doesn't know it yet. So the work still has to be done. Now, how that's going to be done, I have no idea. How much of it will the two witnesses do? I have no idea. But watching the church is a end time factor as well. It's just that it's hard to, now that we're divided in different groups, it's harder to watch, but I still think the church is a key factor. And now I'm giving an opinion, the fact that the church seems relatively small and relatively weak tells me the end is not right around the corner. I know that could change quickly, but that's my opinion.
It says it would be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end. It doesn't say immediately. I mean, it could be years in between there. I mean,
decades.
It could have been that it was, because at one time it was wasn't it pretty much worldwide? And
When the
then,
plane,
I mean, if you look at the history, 6,000 years before that, and 40 since then, or 30, 40 since then, I don't know that it has to be the next day or the next week or the next month. It could be years.
Plain Truth magazine had more people reading it than, and I don't remember what it was. It was like Playboy and Time and People, all these different magazines combined that are big magazines. So the distribution was just enormous, and what that means I don't know, but the distribution was enormous. So I think that every nation, most every nation, has had somebody hear the truth. Ted Armstrong was seen by more people than any other evangelist ever as far as speaking the truth. I know there are other guys out there that may have bigger people watching, more numbers of people watching, but speaking the truth is a whole other story. And so, when you consider more people heard the truth from Garner Ted Armstrong than anybody else ever, to what extent does the whole world have to be preached to? I don't know.
It's something to think about, but one thing to remember, I'm just giving an opinion. A lot of people have become adults after the worldwide church declined its evangelistic effort, so they didn't hear it. All I'm saying is, I think the work of the church is incomplete. How incomplete it is, I don't know. That makes me think we have a little more time, but admittedly, things could go faster than we think. God may have some surprises. And as I say, he could catapult the church or churches to prominence quickly if God wanted to. Not that I'm asking for prominence for any of us. I'm just saying that's a factor. Watching the church and the work of preaching to the world, and it's something that no one really knows for sure. But like you were saying, Dave, the worldwide peaked at 8 million plain truths being given away free worldwide. That's pretty good. So I'm giving the worldwide church in its glory days a lot of credit, but I still think a lot is yet to be done. We just have to wait and see. Let's look at the second factor, the rise of the King of the North, a vast, powerful, Holy Roman Empire that will be in the same territories as the Roman Empire in its heyday, because it was big, in its heyday, from deep into Eastern Central Europe, all the way to Great Britain and Portugal, and a good chunk of North Africa, and Spain. That's and a big chunk of the Middle East as well. It was all under the Roman Empire.
And if you look at
go ahead, Dave.
Well, if you look at the travels and the statements and the things coming out of the Vatican today, they're certainly trying to build that. In my opinion, they're certainly trying to build that again. The Pope is not stepping on a lot of the modern, I would say, contemporary people's toes. He's not coming out and yelling, you're going to, hellfire and brimstone sermons if you commit these terrible sins or whatever. He's a global climate change kind of, he's right down the middle. But that opens the doors to many more people, I think, than if he came out and he called out everybody on every little sin that he could find.
He's trying to build a big coalition, tell them what they want to hear. And like we said earlier, if Europe has tremendous economic problems and or terrorist problems, the Europeans could be begging for a strong man in a few years,
Yeah.
maybe next year.
These next few points that you have listed here, they are getting so clear, so much clearer than they would have been 5 years ago. It's like a fog is thinning to these next few points that they're getting easier and easier to see how they could come about. Just in a
Why
short
don't
period
you
of
read the
time.
next two or three, Ken?
See, rise of the holy. Next one is look for intervention, a great false prophet to help unite Europe. Well, Europe's got a problem right now, major problem with what could possibly be a future king of the South if it involves what we with ISIS now, or if they kind of get pushed out by another power in the South that's tired of dealing with them, maybe a more Arab-centric power. They've been trying to set up something for years, but you could see how that's forming quickly. I mean, very quickly. We're almost forcing it. Pushing it into formation, and it's just getting that much clearer what the King of the South may look like. The next one we're looking at is let's see. Yeah, the great false prophet to help unite Europe. Oh, that's what we just did. King of the South. Let's see. Formation of the King of the South, Islamic Caliphate, and this is the one where Garner Ted predicted this. That it
Many
would
years
form.
ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
I first heard the word caliphate from GTA like 20 years ago or more than that.
Mm-hmm. So I mean that I've heard it. I heard it in his sermons as well, and you can. I mean, this just pops right out at you. That one doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. It's pretty straightforward.
Well, and they're right now ISIS is yelling that they have started, that they have, well, people are saying that the caliphate has been formed in Syria. And in some ways on the surface I can see that. I don't know if it's a great caliphate that we're looking for, but they're certainly trying to do that.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the next one, the rise of the beast, false prophet, and the mark of the beast. Now, if these two guys unite Europe in some great Holy Roman Empire in Europe, one of the big problems in the world is currency. And the euro's in trouble, but others don't trust the dollar. And actually, the Chinese currency is in trouble too, and some other countries as well. What about someone comes with a whole new currency with the picture of the beast on, like George Washington on the dollar bill, the picture of the leader of the Roman Empire, his picture's on, because in German and French, dollar means mark, and the mark has the beast picture on it. Isn't that perfect? I mean, there may be other aspects to the trade restrictions like credit cards and maybe in your hand or, I don't know, credit card numbers. But think about it, the mark of the beast, a new currency.
Well, it says they'll worship the image. So that image has got to be somewhere, and people do worship money.
That's a good one. They do worship money. Put his picture on the money, put his picture on the credit cards or something.
Well, they're talking about taking all of our founders' pictures off of the money now. And I've actually held in my hand money from Iraq, and guess whose picture was on it? Saddam Hussein.
Makes sense. It makes sense.
Get money and get Canadian money and whose picture's on it. Get from many places.
And I'm assuming this will be the international currency, greater than whatever you think the best one is now, the Swiss mark, British pound. It'll be the number one thing, and you've got to use that in world trade. And, well, we can talk about that maybe more at a later time. The next one is decline of the Israelite national powers like America and Britain. And if you go back probably the last 150, maybe even more than that, maybe even back to the 1700s, Britain or America were the major power in the world, stabilizing the world. I mean, really, that's true.
Well, they said that when the Iraqis, I think it was, maybe it was the Afghanistan, I don't know, heard that the U.S. military was flying in, the people were quaking in their boots, and they were just fear, and now they don't have that.
Yeah.
Well, you know why? After the ISIS bombed that Paris, what was the first target Paris went after?
I think it was Raqqa, wasn't it?
It was their command and control.
Yeah.
Right.
And we gave them the target.
What's
So why didn't people got to ask themselves, why was that still there?
Yeah, we've been bombing for what, a year and a half or 2 years. We've never hit their command and control once. Isn't that a bit odd?
Yeah.
My wife said to me, she said, that means they knew where it was. So you hit me, I know where it is, I've known where it is, why didn't I hit that first? Why do I have to hit back?
And think about it, the term Great Britain doesn't even seem to apply anymore. It's just Britain. I read this in the paper, so I assume it's true. Britain doesn't even have one aircraft carrier. Britain used to be the British Empire ruled the waves, the British Navy. Now I realize the American Navy surpassed it, but even still, the British Navy was still a factor, as they proved in the Falkland War. They don't even have a carrier now. Their Navy is hardly anything. And America's Navy is declining. We just don't know that much about it yet, but American Navy is declining too. One of my students said that he just got out of the Navy. He said, we haven't updated the electronics, the controls, many of those warships. They're old. He says the Chinese are building brand new warships with state-of-the-art controls. Nobody seems to realize our Navy's getting older and fewer ships.
Well, one of the politicians running said something about making our military strong again. He says we've got components in our warcraft, whatever it is, 30 years old. It shouldn't be old enough to vote.
So now maybe America's power hasn't declined like Britain's, but we can see the clear trajectory down, can't we?
Oh yeah.
Well, here's the other thing. After all this happened, we said we're going to send 50 special ops into Syria. When this thing happened in Paris, they put 105 troops on the ground. 1,000 troops on the ground. We're going to send 50. In their country, 105,000. We send 50. It doesn't make any sense. Are you going to do it or not?
I believe what these guys on Fox News have been saying may offend people. Well, they say his heart isn't into defeating ISIS or any of this other stuff, but he's going to do just enough not to be too criticized and pass the problem along to the next president. I think that's about it. Do a little bit just so they can't say he's doing nothing, but he won't solve any of the problems. They'll pass it along to the next president, and it will be worse by then.
The only thing that man knew when he came into the office of the presidency was community organizing and activism. He is not a qualified commander-in-chief. He didn't sign up to be a war president. He signed up to be a social program president. And that's what got him elected on the freebie handout. Talking about Britain and the Navy, we don't have an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean. We're renting one from the French. Our Navy is the size of our Navy in 1916.
You gotta be kidding me! We're renting an aircraft carrier from the French.
That's exactly correct. The French had our carrier was called home by Obama, and the French and we rent and French sent one down, and we're renting it to show a presence there.
You mean our Mediterranean fleet?
What Mediterranean fleet? There's no Mediterranean fleet. It's home.
Back in the 80s, I bought a Renault car. I would be very uncomfortable in French machinery.
Well, um, I guess, in all honesty, the next president could rebuild America's military. But what I think is, all those countries that were, in 2008, America calmed the Middle East down and got rid of Saddam. There were some problems, of course, but it was relatively calm compared to now. And all those nations looked to America, like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, what we call the more stable states, and the Persian. I don't think they'll trust America again. The trust. I think our leadership of the world is on its way down.
Well, Deuteronomy 28, 9 and 10 says, if you obey my commandments, and you'll be the people called by my name, and the rest of the world will fear you. But we aren't obeying him, and the rest of the world is not afraid of us.
Yeah. You could go down this list of stuff we're talking about and ask yourself, put a checkbox. Can you see that this has begun or this is progressed? And you could start checking these off one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And here's one that may surprise you: the building of the third temple on the holy site after some catastrophe in Israel. Admittedly, Israel hasn't had the catastrophe yet, but I saw it on Netanyahu's long list of objectives. It's way down the list. He doesn't have the political backing to do it now. But the very fact that the Arabs think the Jews are thinking about getting on the holy mountains while they had all these riots, they are talking about it and thinking about it. And one of these days, the Jews will do it.
One nuclear bomb, one chemical attack, one dirty bomb away from something like this.
Mm-hmm. And two more items. The two witnesses obviously aren't here yet. And the last item I have is censorship of the preaching of the gospel. That may be harder to determine, but it's like the world is going to move away. There may be Christianity, but not real Bible-oriented Christianity. I think churches will find somewhere in the future more and more limitations, and there's some FCC people that have been appointed who want to take religious broadcasting off the airways. Now, so far, I don't think they have Congress on their side or anything yet, but don't you see that someday that could happen?
Well, they're trying to do that left and right. Look at the mayor of Houston. She wants all sermons to be reviewed by her office. They're also talking about different type of licensing for churches. So if you're going to have a gathering and going to have a speaker, they want to see what that speaker is going to say so they can be approved speech. Because if he says something hateful like, Christmas is evil, or we should go to church on the Sabbath, or homosexuality is against God, or something that the Bible may say, that they can say that's not acceptable. That's hate speech, and therefore no license can be given for that gathering.
Yeah, they're in the whole world, the rest of the world. In some cases, you can't preach the truth today, except for the United States, and it's getting thinner. And in what is it, Switzerland or Sweden, you can't speak your mind. You can't preach about homosexuality and promiscuity. Certain things you just can't do that in almost every other country on the planet, except for the United States. We're kind of like the last one before that part of prophecy becomes true.
Some of our Canadian brethren have told me that they have difficulty or concerns in Canada with that sort of thing.
I've read articles where they've been prosecuted.
Yeah. One thing to consider, I listened to Christian radio and I was shocked. They were, because of Ben Carson, they were saying the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a cult, and therefore, I guess should be cut off the airwaves, or they're suspicious of it. And the Seventh-day Adventists, they're pretty easygoing people. They're no threat to anybody. There's nothing there except for the Sabbath. And you would think that Christian radio would say, churches have different doctrines, but because they support the Sabbath, they list them as a dangerous cult. And I was shocked.
Many of them,
They list us if they thought about us.
many of them keep the food laws and the Sabbath, and most of them that I have known don't do Christmas and Easter and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, they're dangerous. So and I'm saying those attitudes of censorship are there even in America. So far, they haven't got a lot of support yet.
You know, maybe that's another reason God broke the church up into so many little groups. We're not a big giant force to be noticed so much. You know,
Yeah, that's a good point. It's harder to little groups all over the place. It's harder to. There's no central, you know, place or leadership that you can take out of control. It's much harder to do.
there's a pro football player. He's like 5'3" or 5'5". He's real small, and they say he's a terrific back because nobody can see him. They're all 6'5", you know, and looking over their shoulder pads, he's gone, you know. Maybe he's made us small and stealthy like that for right now.
And one point I wanted to make is, we probably know this, but prophecy should be read in context with other relevant passages, like everything else in the Bible. You take it out of context, and you can mess up. And number 5, I thought maybe one we should discuss. This is one of the more tricky ones. We recommend that people don't be confused by symbols, icons, and imagery. Let the Bible interpret the Bible. And there are just so many icons. Well, Daniel has a lot, and so does the book of Revelation. And you know, like the beast that rises out of the sea, one represents the false prophet and what we think is some great Babylon, the great church of the end time, and the other represents this great king or dictator. But actually, you know, when you think about the word beast, you could say the Russian bear is on the prowl again. And we'd all know what that meant, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, if you look at the Genesis 3:1, he likened Satan to the beast in a sense. He says Satan is the most subtle of all the beasts. And interesting that he decides to call this power of the beast. You know, I don't think it's going to come into power subtly, but I think once it's there, it's not going to be subtle at all. You know, a couple thoughts I've had is Adolf Hitler was a community organizer. That's how he got his name out there. And if you look around, quite a few others were too in other countries. And they come through acting a certain way, but once they're in power, they become a beast power, you know, a very angry, aggressive power. I think whoever these next leaders are going to come through is with the same demonism as Satan, but with a smile. I'm here to help you, you know. I think Orwell called it newspeak. You know, we're going to come and talk to you the way you want to hear it. And that's also addressed in I don't know where off the top of my head, but he says these are the type of men who will come into gullible women's homes with smooth talk. And when you look at the programs that ladies watch, you know, the things during the day, they're not telling them any reality. They're selling them on homosexuality and promiscuity and all of those other things. And so that becomes, you know, when women are the ones who educate the children and civilize the men, well, these programs and these things open these women's minds, and that destroys the home. And I could give that a generation or 2 or 3. You know, what one generation will just accept, the next one will embrace. And I think that when you look at the last 30, 40 years, and all of us can remember that, that's the other issue. We have people that are voting today that aren't. I had a kid talking to me the other day, he was born in 96 or 98 or something. He didn't know anything about 9/11. You know, I asked him, what happened? What's 9/11 about? I don't know. I mean, we were attacked. For, you know, because we must have done something. These people are voting now. So little by little, our way of life is going away. And when we don't teach our history, we don't teach the Bible, we don't have strong families, it's easy for any of this to happen.
Well, speaking of what you said, it's on the internet. A TV show on ABC called Scandal. One of their last episodes is an emotional. It's a Christmas episode. It's going to be an emotional show with music, which is good for emotion. The music is Silent Night. And guess what the lady is doing emotionally while that music is playing? She's having an abortion. They're making an abortion a thing. I'm aborting my baby. This baby is not going to curse me anymore. And at the end, she could drink wine again. Didn't that just touch your heart?
Yeah, I guess people have seen it and said it's probably one of the most disgusting things they've ever seen.
I said, I think it's ABC. One of them has ABC Children, or one of them NBC Children, and they have a program that's got two 12 or 13-year-old boys that are in love with each other, and they make out. And a 12 or 13-year-old shouldn't be making out with anybody, let alone somebody of their own gender.
Wow, that'd even be sickening to watch. I haven't seen that, but that's terrible.
I saw
ABC
something on the internet.
Family Channel or something, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a family channel.
Yeah. Of course, the last principles, remember that in the end we win. But I want to read one final verse before we cut it off and mention prophecy for a second. Just one little thing. This is Revelation 13. The dragon gave him his power. Revelation 13, verse 3. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon, because the beast is powered by the dragon, because he'd given authority to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? They're going to think this guy is the greatest, most fabulous politician, greatest power in the world, and Satan will have orchestrated the whole thing, however he does it, to make this man look so fabulous, and but deep inside, he'll be a ravening beast. But the world will think he's a hero, like Hitler was for a while.
They're going to get so bad, they're going to look for someone. They're going to be praying that someone saves them from what's going to happen. How bad the world's going to get.
And on the prophecy, just one item. I know we're almost at 9 o'clock, but maybe I can mention it quickly. If you get to read Murray Allah's update from Australia, and it's kind of long, but there's a little part of it where he says that ISIS is so bad that anybody who against ISIS looks good. Now the Russians and Iranians who are fighting ISIS will look good to us. But to the Sunni Muslims, they're going to look at Iran and Russia supporting the Shia Muslims, and they're going to say, well, what's the greatest Sunni Muslim power? ISIS. And then maybe, because that's the majority in the Middle East and the Muslim world, if the Sunnis all start flowing to ISIS, a very, very evil man will get to be in control of all that oil money, oil power, oil wealth in the Middle East. That is scary. Now, maybe he won't win. Maybe somebody else will win it out. But Murray Allah could be right. The way things are working out, the Russians getting involved on the side of as the Muslims might see it, the wrong Shia Muslims may make the Sunni Muslims go to ISIS. I thought, if that were true, that's terrible. And an indication of it, they had a soccer game a few days ago in a stadium in Turkey, and the announcer asked for a moment of silence for the French victims of ISIS. The fans in Turkey booed. They booed the announcement and cheered ISIS. Now, Turkey is supposed to be And then a lot of them yelled out Allah Akbar. Turkey is supposed to be a somewhat moderate Islamic country, and now they're showing support for ISIS. Isn't I mean some of the general public, not the leader, but isn't it unbelievable?
Yeah, I don't know if there are any moderate anymore. They
Indeed.
seem to all. There was a guy, I forget his name, but he was doing he was speaking at a university here not too long ago, and this one girl stood up and was wanted to make her statement known about Israel and the oppressing of and he said something to the effect, will you denounce ISIS for what they've, I think it was after France, and her answer was, her answer is, well, I can't answer that. If I say no, then Homeland Security is going to come out. In other words, she supported ISIS. This is a student, American student, right? And so she wouldn't answer the question because she didn't want to get in trouble. So then he asked her another question. He goes, I forget the leader of Hamas said he's glad that all the Jews are going back to Jerusalem so that they won't have to search out the world to find them, to dig them up, to root them out. They can get them all in one place. And he says, do you agree with that statement? And there's this young girl at a university. She said, yep. I thought that was kind of chilling, that they're brainwashed that bad, that that's fine with her, that they get them all in one place so they can kill them all at once so that they don't have to search them out throughout the world. That's what we're up against. That's the mentality that, we didn't talk about it, but in the universities, these things are being bred into the universities, and that's an internal strife that I think we're going to face, as well as what we're getting externally from ISIS and the other powers in the world. I think that's our next battle we're going to see in this country.
Yep. An evil king of the South is being formed.
Yep.
I had a fella get real upset with me, and I've known him for a few years. His father's an amazing artist. Has been they're Canadian, and his father's been featured in, I don't remember, countless college workbooks on art. He's an incredible artist. And he sent me a message on Facebook and said he found it very upsetting that, some of the things I posted were I was against these Islamic groups and things, and that he had known so many Muslims that were so sweet and so nice, and that I couldn't. I seemed to be in general, and I said, well, where were you when they were vandalizing my place and calling me up and threatening to kill me and all of that? And he goes, oh, I would have told them they needed to stop too, but that's only one or two of them. That's not the whole group. And I said, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't, we got it bad. We were living in a very high Muslim area. We got it bad. And they vandalized my business and my car, and they were calling and cussing my wife out in Arabic. She'd answer the phone and screaming at in Arabic. She's like, I'm from New York. I have no clue what you're talking about. I bought a coach's whistle and would just blow it in the phone and hang up on them. And I told that to him, and he says, well, I'm certain, though, that it was just such a small amount. There's just hardly nobody. It was daily. It was multiple times a day. And so I finally, there was no reasoning with him, so I unfriended him. But he's so lost on what's going on around him. And he said, well, I had a professor that was Muslim, and he helped me get good grades in college. But obviously he's not read the Quran, because the Quran says befriend them so that they trust you.
And then when they have the upper hand, become the majority, then they turn suddenly, and you find out that you better convert or else.
Well, that's what they were saying today in Mali. If the people could quote something out of the Quran, they didn't kill them.
Yeah, that hotel, yeah.
And apparently,
is that still ongoing?
I think it's over. Yeah.
How many did they kill in Mali? I didn't hear. Was it?
Yeah, they've taken the motel. Apparently, many of the people were gutted alive. Is what they were saying, because they're trying to be more disgusting than the last group.
You know what? You know what they were? I heard something today that when they were shooting the people in Paris, after they shot them, they were going by and cutting them open. I never
Yeah.
heard that before, and I heard it today about that. Then I just heard what you said. I never heard that before.
The back in the 80s, a Muslim group, Islamic group, had kidnapped somebody, that some Russian official or something, and it may have been the 90s, because I believe Putin had something to do with it. He went and got somebody that was related somehow to this Islamic guy or group, and he sent them their hand, and he says, you'll get a piece of them every day until I get my guy back. He got his guy back. They only understand certain things. You know, you housebreak a dog, you hit him with the paper, you show him where to go, you walk him outside. After a while, he learns. You got to speak to people how they understand.
And prophecy.
Well, what was that, John?
I said, and all this prophecy just marches on.
Yes, it does.
And
have we covered everything that you wanted to cover?
yeah, why don't we mention that next week we're going to talk about Thanksgiving, and I just think it's important because everybody needs to be thankful to God more than we Americans are. It'd be nice for us to talk about Thanksgiving next Friday, as everybody is still belching up from all the turkey.
or falling asleep.
We'll talk about the real first Thanksgiving.
Okay.
What they don't teach you what they don't teach in the schools. And I love Thanksgiving. It's one national holiday, that one of the major ones that I can get behind. you know, you got Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, or Halloween, but here's one I can get behind.
Even New Year's isn't really the New Year.
No, not that either. But this is one of the major national holidays, and I could definitely get behind. Turkey is already in the freezer and will be ready to go.
We're traveling, so we had turkey tonight.
Well, I'll just say to each of you and to all those watching, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Let's give thanks to God for what we have.
Yep. Yep,
Right.
Absolutely. So with that, we'll say good night. Glad everyone could share their Sabbath with us. We do appreciate all those that are able to watch. And make sure that always seek the kingdom, and let's see if we can't get this to roll.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.